June 12, 1943. Just after dawn. Outside Tunis, North Africa. The desert air is cold enough to sting the lungs. Obergefreiter Karl Müller presses his face into the sand as Allied boots crunch past him. His rifle is gone. His helmet lies several meters away, half buried, rocking slightly in the wind from a nearby explosion that no longer matters. The fighting has moved on. For him, the war is over. You can almost feel the exhaustion in his body. Weeks of retreat, constant hunger, bread stretched thin, coffee replaced by brown water, cigarettes traded like currency. Müller hasn't eaten properly in days. His hands shake, not from fear, but from the dull, hollow weakness that never quite leaves anymore. A voice shouts in English. He doesn't understand the words, only the tone, sharp, commanding. Then something unexpected happens. He is told to stand, not kicked, not struck, just ordered, firmly, efficiently. Hands raised, he joins a line of other German soldiers, infantrymen, a medic, a young lieutenant whose boots are worn nearly through at the soles. Faces gray with dust and disbelief. They expect the worst. They have been told what awaits them. For years, German propaganda had painted a clear picture of capture by the Americans. Brutal guards, starvation, humiliation, a nation of gangsters and profiteers, decadent and cruel. Better to fight to the end, the leaflet said. Better to die. Müller believes this, at least he thinks he does. But belief is fragile when your stomach is empty. They are marched to a collection point, a temporary enclosure marked by wire and canvas. U.S. Army military police stand watch, rifles slung, chewing gum with irritating calm. Somewhere nearby, a field kitchen clanks to life. And then Müller smells it. Hot food. Not ersatz soup. Not thin turnip broth. Something richer. Meaty. Real. Steam rises into the cold air, carrying an aroma that makes his mouth fill despite himself. He looks up. Large metal containers are being opened. Ladles dipped. Tin trays passed down a line, not to Americans, but to them, the prisoners. A soldier in an olive uniform meets Müller's eyes briefly, then hands him a tray. It is heavy. The meal is simple by American standards. Stew, white bread, a piece of fruit. But to Müller, it looks unreal. The bread is soft, not gray. The stew has visible chunks of meat, potatoes, carrots, not scraps, not filler. Real food. He waits, convinced there must be a trick, that this is some kind of test, that it will be taken away. It isn't. Eat, a guard says, gesturing with his chin. Müller eats. Around him, other German soldiers do the same. Slowly at first, then faster. The lieutenant stops halfway through, staring at his tray as if it might disappear. The medic wipes his mouth with the back of his hand, eyes unfocused. No one speaks. The sound is cutlery and breathing. Somewhere in the camp, someone laughs. That, more than anything, feels wrong. Within hours, the prisoners are loaded onto trucks, then trains, then ships. They are processed, searched, counted, and moved again. The journey blurs into heat, metal, and time. Müller stops trying to guess where they are going. Eventually, weeks later, they arrive. The United States. The camp sits in a wide-open landscape Müller has never imagined. Flat land stretching to the horizon, dotted with wooden barracks and water towers. The air smells of grass, oil, and something sweet he cannot place. They are marched inside. Barbed wire, guard towers, the familiar geometry of captivity. But the details are wrong. There are Red Cross signs, notices in German, sports fields, a library building, and everywhere there is food. 3 meals a day, hot meals, breakfast with eggs, real eggs, coffee that tastes like coffee, bread without mold, lunch with meat again. Supper that leaves them full in a way Müller had not felt since before Stalingrad became a word whispered with dread. Then there are the cigarettes, American brands, Camels, Lucky Strikes, issued regularly, casually. Guards smoke them too, offering one now and then without ceremony. Müller takes his first cigarette in months and nearly coughs himself sick. It is strong, fresh. He stares at it afterward, burned down to the filter, as if it were evidence in a trial. At night, lying on his bunk, Mueller listens to the sounds of the camp. No screaming, no beatings, no starvation. Men talk, argue, some even joke. Someone says quietly, "This can't be real." Another answers, "It won't last." But days pass, then weeks. Packages arrive. Red Cross parcels with chocolate, soap, extra food. Letters are allowed. Medical care is prompt. Discipline is firm, but predictable. This is not what they were told, and that realization is more unsettling than fear. Because if this is a lie, then what else is? Mueller stares at the wooden ceiling above him, cigarette smoke curling into the dim light, and feels something he hasn't felt since the war began. Doubt. July 1943. Prisoner of war camp, Midwest United States. The shock does not come all at once. It arrives in layers. At first, the German prisoners tell themselves this is temporary, a show for the Red Cross, a calculated performance meant to soften them for interrogation. Mueller hears the theories whispered at night. Guards will change, rations will shrink, reality will assert itself. It doesn't. Instead, the routine hardens into something undeniable. Breakfast arrives at the same hour every morning. Lunch is hot, even in the summer heat. Supper is filling enough that leftovers sometimes go uneaten. The idea would have been obscene on the Eastern Front. And then there is the waste. That is what unsettles them most. Food scraps dumped casually, cigarette stubs crushed halfway through, bread thrown away because it is stale after a day. Stale. Mueller watches an American cook scrape a pot into a bin thick with stew that would have fed a German platoon for a night. The cook hums while he works. He does not look angry. He does not look triumphant. He looks bored. You can almost feel Mueller's mind struggle to absorb that. The prisoners begin to notice the scale. Trains roll past the camp daily, long lines of freight cars loaded with grain, cattle, fuel, machinery. Trucks arrive constantly, bringing supplies not just for the camp, but for towns beyond it. Roads stretch endlessly, paved and maintained, carrying traffic at all hours. This is not a country scraping by. This is a country overflowing. For years, German radio broadcasts had described America as soft, decadent, divided, a nation of racial tension and labor unrest, incapable of sustained war. Capitalists fat and lazy, dependent on others for real strength. Standing in line for dinner, Mueller tries to reconcile that image with what he sees. A guard chats casually with a fellow MP about baseball scores. Another reads a newspaper thick with pages filled with advertisements for cars, refrigerators, food products Mueller has never heard of. Even at war, America is selling abundance to itself. The cigarettes become a symbol. Each prisoner receives them regularly, as stipulated by the Geneva Convention. The Americans follow the rules meticulously. Too meticulously, some prisoners think. In Germany, cigarettes are currency. On the front, they buy favors, silence, sometimes survival. Here, they are handed out like an afterthought. One evening, Mueller trades a single Lucky Strike for 3 hand-carved chess pieces made by another POW. He feels vaguely ashamed afterward, not because the trade was unfair, but because the cigarette meant so little to him here. Scarcity has vanished, and with it, certainty. Letters from home begin to arrive. They are censored, brief, carefully worded, but the truth leaks through. Rations shrinking, bombing raids intensifying, cities dark and hungry, families surviving on thin soups and ration cards. The contrast is brutal. Mueller reads one letter twice, then folds it carefully and places it beneath his mattress. That night, he cannot sleep. The camp is quiet except for insects and distant trains. He is safer here than his family is at home. That thought feels like betrayal. American guards notice the change. At first, the Germans had been tense, defiant, suspicious. Now, conversations begin. Small ones. Questions about American cities, about factories, about farms. One guard explains that much of the food comes from the Midwest. Endless fields, mechanized farming, silos that stretch higher than church steeples. Another mentions that American cigarette factories run day and night. For us, for you, "For the front," he says with a shrug. The casual confidence is more convincing than any speech. This abundance is not an exception. It is the system. The camp commandant organizes work details. Prisoners volunteer, or are assigned, to nearby farms, canneries, and warehouses. Under guard, they step outside the wire and see America up close. Cornfields that seem to go on forever. Barns filled with equipment more advanced than anything Mueller saw in France. Trucks hauling produce faster than German rail schedules ever allowed. They work hard. And they are paid, small amounts but real wages, enough to buy extra items at the camp canteen, candy, toiletries, more cigarettes. Mueller buys chocolate once. He has not tasted it since 1940. It melts in his mouth, unfamiliar and almost overwhelming. At night, the debates begin. Some prisoners insist this is all deception, that America is wasting resources now and will collapse later, that German efficiency will ultimately prevail. Others are no longer so sure. "How do you bomb this?" one man asks quietly, gesturing toward the horizon. No one answers, because the truth is forming, slowly and inexorably. You cannot starve a country that feeds its enemies better than it feeds its own soldiers, and that realization carries a weight heavier than any bomb. As Mueller lies awake again, listening to the hum of a distant highway, he feels the ground shift beneath beliefs he once held as solid. If America can do this, what chance did Germany ever really have? August 1943. The questions no longer stay whispered. They surface openly now, in the barracks after evening roll call, in low voices that grow steadily bolder. The tone has changed, not defiant, not fearful, analytical. The men begin comparing notes, not about battles or units, but about narratives, what they were told, what they are seeing, and what no longer fits. Mueller sits on his bunk while a former schoolteacher from Hamburg sketches numbers into a notebook scavenged from the camp library. Production figures copied from American newspapers, steel output, aircraft numbers, shipbuilding rates. The numbers are staggering. Not exaggerated radio boasts, printed facts, publicly available, reported with a casual transparency that feels almost arrogant. Liberty ships launched faster than Germany can sink them. Factories converting civilian lines to military production in weeks. Entire towns organized around output and logistics. This is not chaos. This is coordination on a scale Mueller has never imagined. The cigarettes come up again. A former Wehrmacht quartermaster explains it quietly. Tobacco is not essential. If America can afford to give it away, to prisoners no less, it means supply lines are not strained. It means production exceeds need. And if this is excess, he says, holding a cigarette between his fingers, then what do they keep for themselves? No one laughs. German propaganda had always emphasized American softness, consumerism as weakness, comfort as decay, a people too distracted by pleasure to fight a real war. But the prisoners now see something different, comfort as capacity, abundance as resilience. America is not indulgent because it is careless. It is indulgent because it can be. The guards work long shifts. The factories run around the clock. The trains never stop. There is no sense of desperation, only momentum. And momentum, Mueller realizes, is terrifying. In the camp library, banned books are replaced by American ones. Technical manuals, farming journals, engineering magazines. A young Luftwaffe mechanic pores over diagrams of assembly lines, tracing efficiencies with his finger. "They think in systems," he mutters, "not miracles." That sentence lingers. Germany has chased wonder weapons. America has perfected processes. One is spectacular, the other is unstoppable. News from the outside trickles in. Italy has surrendered. Allied forces advance. The Eastern Front bleeds Germany white. Each update lands differently now, filtered through what the prisoners have learned inside the wire. Losses no longer feel temporary. They feel structural. Mueller notices how the camp mood shifts after these announcements. Fewer arguments, fewer ideological speeches, more silence. Belief does not collapse all at once. It erodes. One evening, an American guard sits with Mueller during a break. They talk about nothing important, weather, farming, cigarettes again. Then the guard says something casually, without malice. My brother's in the Navy, Pacific, says the same thing. They can't keep up with us. Mueller nods slowly. For the first time he believes it. The realization spreads quietly through the camp. Germany is not losing because its soldiers lack courage, not because its weapons are inferior, but because it cannot compete with a system designed for endless output, a system that feeds its enemies while fighting a global war. That truth is harder to endure than captivity, because it means the war's outcome may already be decided, and the men who once believed themselves on the winning side are beginning to understand something far worse than defeat. They were never meant to win. September 1943. The transformation is subtle but irreversible. The German prisoners no longer speak about America as a caricature. The old language, gangsters, degenerates, profiteers, sounds hollow now, almost childish. It belongs to a world they no longer inhabit. In its place comes something more dangerous: respect. Mueller notices it first in himself. It happens while working a harvest detail on a nearby farm. The sun is high, the work steady and physical. American machinery moves through the fields with practiced ease, tractors pulling equipment that would have taken entire teams of men back home. The farmer, a middle-aged man with oil-stained hands, works alongside them without supervision, without fear. At midday they break. Water is passed around, then food, thick sandwiches, apples, more than enough. The farmer sits on the tailgate of his truck and talks, not about the war, but about yields, weather patterns, fuel costs, ordinary concerns, spoken with quiet confidence. Mueller listens carefully. This man is not wealthy, he is not powerful, and yet he is productive in a way Mueller has never seen. Multiply this farm by 10,000, by 100,000. The scale becomes impossible to ignore. Back at camp, the discussions deepen. A former party member argues that American abundance is temporary, fueled by debt and waste. Another prisoner counters calmly, pointing to infrastructure: highways, rail networks, ports operating at full capacity without strain. This was built before the war, he says. They didn't create it in panic. They had time. That word lands heavily. Time. Germany rushed. America prepared. More letters arrive from home. The tone has changed. Where once there was optimism, now there is fatigue. Bombing raids have intensified. Fuel shortages are constant. Cigarettes are gone entirely. Food is rationed so tightly that hunger becomes routine. Mueller reads his sister's handwriting, thinner now, more precise. She does not complain. She simply reports. The contrast with his own life is unbearable. He eats better than his family. He sleeps without fear of air raids. And for the first time, he understands what total war really means. Not bravery, not sacrifice, capacity. The prisoners begin to talk about the future, quietly, carefully. What will Germany look like after this? Who will rebuild it? What will remain when the factories are rubble and the myths are gone? Some speak of returning home to farms and trades. Others avoid the topic entirely. A few cling to hope of reversal, but their voices sound rehearsed, unconvincing. Belief has lost its heat. One night, a Red Cross film is shown in the camp hall. It depicts American cities at work: shipyards launching vessels in rapid succession, women assembling aircraft engines, warehouses stacked high with supplies. No narration, no triumph, just images. Mueller feels a tightening in his chest. This is not propaganda. It doesn't need to be. He realizes something then, sitting in a room full of enemy soldiers, watching another enemy's strength on display. America did not need to terrify Germany into surrender. It only needed to exist. And captivity, paradoxically, has shown them the truth more clearly than freedom ever could. The wire around the camp has not confined their bodies. It has confined their illusions. As the lights come back on and the prisoners file out in silence, Mueller knows the war will end eventually. But what ends here, in this place, is something else entirely. The story they were told about the world. November 1943. The first snow settles lightly over the camp, muting sound, softening edges. The watchtowers look less menacing under white caps, almost ordinary. Even the barbed wire seems subdued, half buried, as if the landscape itself is trying to forget the war. Inside the barracks, men sit hunched over rough wooden tables. They are writing letters, not the kind they wrote before. These are slower, more deliberate, words chosen, crossed out, rewritten. Some pages are torn up entirely and fed into the stove. Muller writes to his sister. He does not mention abundance. He does not mention cigarettes or chocolate or the fact that he has gained weight. That would feel like betrayal. Instead, he writes something else. The Americans are not what we were told. He pauses there for a long time, staring at the sentence as if it might accuse him of treason. Then he continues. They are organized, calm, confident. They do not seem afraid of the future. He does not write the thought that follows, that Germany does. Across the barracks, others struggle with the same problem. How do you explain a truth that dismantles an entire worldview? One man writes to his father, a party loyalist, describing factories that never stop and workers who argue openly with supervisors. Another writes to his wife about meals eaten without ration cards, about guards who enforce rules but do not humiliate. Some letters will be censored, some will never arrive. But the act of writing matters. It is the moment when doubt becomes permanent. The camp receives new prisoners, Afrika Korps veterans, gaunt and sunburned, recently captured in Italy. They arrive carrying the old confidence, the old jokes about American softness. The veterans listen politely. Then they wait. Within days, the newcomers fall silent too. They see the same things, eat the same meals, smoke the same cigarettes. Reality does the work. An American chaplain gives a short talk one Sunday. He speaks of rebuilding after the war, of forgiveness, of returning to normal life. No threats, no conditions. Muller finds this unsettling. Germany speaks of victory or annihilation. America speaks of after. That difference feels decisive. By winter's end, something remarkable has happened. The camp is no longer merely a holding place for enemy soldiers. It has become an unintentional classroom. Men trained to obey have learned to observe. Men trained to hate have learned to compare. Men trained to believe have learned to question. And questioning, Muller realizes, is irreversible. One evening, as snow falls again, Muller shares a cigarette with a former SS conscript. They stand near the barracks door, breath visible in the cold. "If we had known this," the man says quietly, gesturing toward the lights of a distant American town, "would we have fought the same?" Muller does not answer immediately. The question is too large, too late. What captivity has done is not break them. It has disarmed them, not physically, but ideologically. And when the war finally ends, many of these men will return to a Germany in ruins, carrying something unexpected back with them. Not loyalty to the enemy, but memory of a place where abundance was normal, where power did not shout, where strength did not need permission to exist. And those memories will prove more dangerous to the old lies than any bomb. April 1945. The gates open without ceremony. No speeches, no bands, just paperwork, lists, signatures. Names called out in careful English and accented German. Men step forward carrying duffel bags that weigh less than they should, yet feel heavier than anything they carried into captivity. Muller walks out slowly. He pauses once, turning back toward the barracks. The watchtower. The wire. The place where the war quietly rewrote him. Then he keeps walking. The journey home is long and disjointed. Train cars crowded with returning soldiers and displaced civilians. Cities reduced to outlines. Factories hollowed out. Fields cratered and abandoned. Germany smells different now. Smoke, damp stone, hunger. At each stop, people ask the same questions. How was America? Were they cruel? Did they starve you? Muller learns to hesitate before answering, because the truth lands like an insult. He reaches his hometown in late May. The house still stands, but the windows are boarded. His sister is thinner, older. Their mother has died during the winter. They sit at the table, a single candle between them. Bread is divided carefully. And then the questions come again. How was the camp? Muller clears his throat. We ate, he says finally. His sister looks up sharply. Every day? Yes. Silence fills the room. He does not mention second helpings, or cigarettes, or chocolate, or guards who joked and complained and planned for futures beyond the war. He watches disbelief harden into something like resentment. Across Germany, the same conversations unfold. Former POWs are viewed with suspicion. Accusations whispered. You had it easy. You didn't suffer. You were fed while we starved. Some men stop talking altogether. Others speak anyway. And slowly, quietly, an unofficial counter-history begins to circulate. In taverns, workshops, and rebuilding sites, stories emerge. About American factories larger than entire towns. About food so plentiful it was wasted. About guards who enforced rules without fear. At first, people laugh. Propaganda runs deep. But hunger makes listeners patient. And repetition makes doubt contagious. The Allied occupation authorities notice something curious. Former POWs integrate faster. They adapt to civilian labor more easily, question orders more openly, argue without flinching. They have seen a system that functions without terror. They are no longer impressed by slogans. Mueller finds work clearing rubble. One day, an American engineer oversees the site. He is young, relaxed. He eats lunch sitting on a pile of bricks, offering a cigarette without ceremony. Mueller accepts. For a moment, the war collapses into a shared habit. The engineer talks about going home, about college, about buying a car. Mueller listens carefully, not with envy, with recognition. What captivity gave him was not admiration for America. It gave him a measuring stick. He can now compare promise to outcome. And Germany, stripped of illusion, measures poorly. Years later, historians will debate whether American POW camps violated or upheld the Geneva Convention. They will analyze calorie counts, Red Cross shipments, labor assignments, but they will miss the most significant consequence. Captivity did not merely remove German soldiers from the battlefield, it removed the battlefield from their minds. Because when these men returned, they did not bring back tales of brutality. They brought back evidence that abundance was possible, that order did not require fear, that power could afford restraint. And once a lie is disproven by lived experience, it cannot be resurrected, not even by a nation desperate to believe it. Mueller stands in a rebuilt railway station, watching trains arrive on time, not marching songs, not banners, just commuters, workers, students arguing softly over newspapers. Germany is different now, not healed, but awake. The stories that once sounded dangerous have become mundane. Former POWs no longer whisper. They speak plainly, about systems that work, about leadership without spectacle, about a country that won not by cruelty, but by capacity. Their children listen, and that may be the most consequential outcome of all. In American archives, reports from the War Department sit untouched for decades. They note something unusual. German POWs held in the United States showed lower rates of post-war radicalization than those held elsewhere. Many expressed admiration for American civilian life. Some applied to emigrate. A few succeeded. No one had planned this. No PSYOPs division designed it. It happened because reality was stronger than propaganda. The Reich had promised sacrifice would lead to greatness. America demonstrated something more subversive, that productivity creates freedom, that abundance stabilizes society, that a nation confident in its future does not need to starve prisoners to prove strength. This realization spread quietly. Barracks to letters, letters to homes, homes to rebuilding sites to a new political culture. The Luftwaffe was defeated in the sky. The Wehrmacht was defeated in the field. But National Socialism suffered its most permanent loss in American prison camps, where German soldiers were not beaten, they were fed. Mueller never becomes an admirer of war, but he becomes skeptical of anyone who glorifies it. He raises his children to question slogans, to examine outcomes, to distrust systems that require constant enemies to survive. He does not tell them about cigarettes or chocolate. He tells them about silence, about how dangerous it is when a lie finally runs out of answers. History often records victories in territory gained or armies destroyed, But some victories leave no ruins. They leave comparisons. And comparisons change everything. The German POWs who arrived in America expecting humiliation found something worse for a totalitarian myth, a functioning alternative. And once seen, it could never be unseen.